Hello, I'm Jennifer McGuire and welcome to my happy space. This is my craft room where I create handmade cards and I shoot how-to videos to share with you. Many people have been asking for a tour of my room and I'm happy to finally do so. But as I show you around, keep in mind that this is my job. So this isn't really a craft room, but rather a workshop or an office. I have a lot of tools and organization that help me to stay productive. And just like a carpenter who has lots of tools, I have a lot of supplies on hand. Remember, to have fun with crafting, you don't need this much, but it really helps me with my job. I'm just hoping that by sharing this room with you, you might be inspired to try some of the organization that I've done along the way. So if you have more questions about what I talk about, I have a lot of videos that give more details, so be sure to check those out below. When I created this craft room, there were a few things that I knew would really help me out. One thing I knew is that I wanted a smaller room. I used to be in the basement and twice the size, and it was really overwhelming. I just collected too much stuff and I didn't know what to do with it. So I knew I needed a smaller room, and I also work better if things are behind cabinets and tucked away. It just keeps me from feeling overwhelmed. I also found that if I work at a table where I'm not facing a wall, if I'm looking out in the open, it's much better for me creatively. So I knew I wanted to kind of have an island where I could work. I have drawers near me with my top used tools, and I have things stashed away that I reach for often. I have a video camera set above so that I can film the cards that I make to share with you. Now, the most important thing about a craft room is making sure it's your happy place. You want to fill it with whatever makes you happy. For me, it was bright colors and treasures that I've collected from some friends. I even have cards on display that some friends have sent to me. So whatever you do, make sure it works for you. If you like things open, go for that. If you like things closed up, go for that. Just make it your happy place. So let me show you into the drawers that are nearest where I work. These are where I store my most essential products. So this is my main drawer where I keep my most used supplies. I use these on almost every card, so I think it's important to have it close by so I don't have to waste any time. In here I have my craft knives and the pens I use often, my favorite adhesives and tools. I have baby wipes and even my stamp chamois so I can quickly clean stamps as I'm working. I have other little tools that I reach for often. It's really important to think those things out when you're putting your room together. I like to have little dishes on hand where I can put little pieces that I'm working with that I don't want to lose on my work surface as I create. So in this drawer I have more things that I use on almost every card. I have my acrylic blocks and tapes here. Over here I have pre-cut and scored note cards. Some of them I buy already pre-cut and scored, but some I do on my own. These are the top folding 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note cards that I create from my favorite white cardstock. I like to have a bunch of these ready so I don't have to stop and do it as I'm creating. I also have my favorite white cardstock pre-cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So when I'm creating, I can just grab one of these and do my stamping, and I don't have to take the time to cut them. And I even keep little scraps in here so that I can use those also. In the back here, I have pieces of craft foam ready so that I can put these on the front of my card if I want some dimension behind my stamped pieces. I find that by having things pre-cut, it saves me a lot of time. So this drawer is one of my favorites in the whole room. Here I have a lot of my favorite colors of distress inks. I think distress inks are must-have for any stamper because there's many wonderful techniques you can do with them. Now this ink storage unit is meant to be stood upright. That way you can have the ink along with the matching re-inker. However, I have mine laying down in my drawer. It was a perfect fit. And instead of putting a re-inker, I've put the ink blending tool that matches that ink. I like this because I can quickly find the color I want by looking at the ink blending tool. And then I have one ready to go. However, it really isn't necessary to have an ink blending tool for each ink. You could instead use a piece of Velcro to stick it on the bottom of the ink pad and switch it out each time. But this just helps me kind of get my work done faster for my job. I also have down here my clear and white embossing powders because I use them quite often. So I sit here when I create, and there's a little shelf under here where I keep like my work pad and my trimmers. I also have on the shelf my heat gun so that whenever I need to emboss something, I can just pull the heat gun up and then tuck it underneath. I even have a power strip under there that's controlled by a remote so that I can turn this off when I leave so that I don't have to worry about any safety concerns. Over here I have my Big Shot and my most used inks. These are the ones that I reach for the most often, so I thought it'd be good to have it right next to where I work so I don't have to get up while I'm creating. I also have my essential inks that I use most often, like my black dye ink, Versamark, and white pigment ink. I have all of the rest of my inks behind me. Up here I have my Sizzix Big Shot machine. I use this for videos, but when I do my crafting for myself, I use the Vagabond, which is right behind me. Now behind my desk I have a lot of cabinets. I worked with a designer and a remodeler to pick out the best cabinets, and they happen to be the same ones that we use in the kitchen. I like them because I can close everything up and I have pull-out drawers. In this cabinet I have most of my die cutting supplies. I like to use the Vagabond electronic die cut machine, so I had a plug put in here so it could always be plugged in. So I can just come here, pull this out, do my die cutting, and collect the scraps below. I have my plates on hand too. Here's where I store my wafer thin dies. I use these quite often. I have them stored in little sleeves so that I can label them, and if there's multiple dies in the set, they don't get lost from each other. I have most of the wafer thin dies stored in these pockets, but I have some bigger ones for my bigger dies in the back. These are all divided by category so I can quickly find whatever I'm looking for. Over here I've put some magnetic paper into my door so that I just have stuck to it my favorite dies, the ones that I'm reaching for often, so I don't have to go digging for them every time. This has really saved me a lot of time. Below I have more wafer thin dies, extra stamps, some stencils, and embossing folders stored the same way. Up here I have many of my favorite coloring tools. I have all of my Copic markers here, and it's right behind where I work, so I can come back here and grab whichever ones I need. And I have my color chart on hand to help me out. Up here I have some of the markers that I use often, Tombow markers, distress markers, shimmer pens, some extra white gel pens, and even my paint brushes. Above I just have extra storage, and then I have my mists, paints, and stains in this basket. In this cabinet I have most of my clear stamps. I store each of my clear stamps in a sleeve. This way I can label them and also store any coordinating dies in the back. Now some stamp sets are taller or smaller, so I just use whatever size pocket best fits them. All of my clear stamps are stored in these interdesign containers, and they're split so they have two halves, and each container holds about 150 stamp sets. I use dividers that I've cut from plastic folders, and I divide them by manufacturer, but it may make more sense to divide them by theme. But for my workflow, manufacturer is best. In the middle of my drawer, I store my larger stamp sets, such as my 6x6 background stamps. This top drawer is where I put anything new that I've gotten that I want to be sure to try to use in an upcoming card. So whenever I go to create, this is the first place that I stop. In the bottom of this cabinet, I have my wood-mounted stamps stored. I used to store them in baskets, but I couldn't see everything and I was rarely using them. So instead, I store them on shelves on spice racks, so it's like tiers of stamps, so I can easily see them all. I do have more rubber stamps. They're stored up high and in a basket also. These are the ones that I like to reach for the most. I also store my Handmade by Jennifer stamps down here. Up above, I have more of my dye inks. I showed you where next to where I work, I have my favorite colors. These are the rest of the lines. I have them broken down by ink type, but these are mostly dye inks and distress inks. I have my pigment inks over on the other side of the room. Now for all of these, I put a little ink swatch on the side, a little dot that has been stamped with the right color, because sometimes the color of the lid doesn't really match the color of the ink. So I find that's very helpful so you can see exactly what color's inside. Another thing that I do to determine what colors I have is I have an ink swatch system. So when I get a new ink, I stamp the color so I know what the true color is. I can take these out and take them to my workspace and see what color matches perfectly. And I have free downloads for all of these ink swatches. To go along with that, I have this little container that's very handy. It has my stamp cleaner and my scrubbing pad, but I also have the stamp that's needed to create my ink swatches. and also the little dot stickers that I use to put the color on the side of the inks. These shelves are from Organize More, and I really think they're handy to have when you have a lot of inks. But remember, you don't need this many inks. I have these for my work, but you just need to find an ink line that you like and pick out the colors you like. Now in the corners of my rooms, I have some shelves that hold baskets and books and just supplies that I don't use as often. I also love succulents, so I have a lot of those on hand and some pieces that I got as gifts from friends. I have lots of handmade cards on display. I didn't make any of these. These are all beautiful cards that I received from friends, and I think that's so inspiring. Here I have a long countertop where I can kind of spread out my projects and look at the things that I have to work with. Below I have IKEA units. These are the IKEA Alex drawer units. They're inexpensive and they're very efficient. A lot of great space in these drawer units. So I had my builder build them in so it had a nice finished look. In this drawer I have my Misty stamping tools. These tools are very helpful if you do a lot of stamping. You just put your clear or cling stamp on the door, put your paper inside and close it, and you get a perfect image every time. I have several of these Misty tools because I usually have more than one project going on at a time. I have these fun sleeves that my friend Mary Dawn made for me. I just love having them in that. There are also mini Misty stamping tools, and in one of these I have the image that I stamp on the back of my cards in there so that every time I create a card, I can just put it in, ink it, and stamp it, and I get it in the right place every time. I think one of the best tips when it comes to creating is to get paper pre-cut and you have it ready to go. So I buy my favorite cardstocks in a ream and I take them to Kinko's and have them cut in bulk for me. It's very inexpensive to do. So here I have Nina Classic Crest Solar White cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 in both the 80 pound, which is a little lighter weight, and the 110 pound, which is a little heavier. I have more of this right by where I work. This is just a backup stash. I also have distressed watercolor paper and the Nina Desert Storm, which is a fun craft cardstock. In the back, I have same white cardstocks, just cut differently. This is just cut right down the middle the long way, and I can fold this and create a note card. So I have these ready to go also. I have some of those in my drawer too. So this is just additional cardstock that I have ready. I really like to add enamel dots and gems to my projects. However, sometimes they come in a package where there's multiple colors. So what I found best to do is to cut them into strips so that you could store all the pinks and reds together, all the yellows and oranges together, and then you can find whatever matches your project best. This has been a huge time saver for me, and I find that I use them much more often. People often ask how I store my colored cardstock scraps. I have this column of drawers dedicated to those scraps, and I just divide them up kind of by color families. This has saved me a lot of cardstock and a lot of time. I even have my specialty paper scraps in the bottom drawer. In this column of drawers, I store more of my coloring tools. Each drawer is a different type of tool. For example, this is markers. I have a drawer for my watercolors and a drawer for my colored pencils. By having everything together, I don't have to go fishing for it. Here's where I store little jars of embellishments such as tiny sequins and some glitters. I find it helpful to have some Swiffer dusting cloths handy because that helps with cleanup of those otherwise messy embellishments. I also use coffee filters to help contain it as I'm creating. I go through a lot of adhesive, so I have a couple drawers for adhesive. I used to teach classes, so I have a bunch of my favorite adhesive, which is the Tombow Stamp Runner. I have them refilled so they're ready to go when I run out. I have some of my other favorite adhesives here also. I really like heat embossing, so I have several embossing powders. I have some of my colored embossing powders here with a circle that I have heat embossed, so I know exactly what color is inside. I have additional colors in larger jars. And the powders that I reach for the most, I have in little containers where I have a cable clip that holds a mini spoon. So I can use the spoon to scoop the powder onto my project and put all the extra powder back into the container. and then there's less mess. On this side of the room, I have more IKEA Alex drawer units. This is the wider model, and these are great for crafting supplies. In these drawers, I have mostly office supplies. I also have extra stamp and die pockets, and then refills for my label maker. I find that by having all my organization stuff together, I'm more likely to use it. I have some more embellishments over here. I really love buttons. I don't use them on my cards very much, but I keep them for other craft projects. I used to have them all mixed together in jars, and I never used them, but once I divided them into color, I started using them more. In this drawer, I have all of my sequin storage. I have these bead containers, and you can take one out at a time, take out what you need, and then put them back. This has been helpful in keeping them organized, and again, I use them more when they're all in the same type of container. People often ask about like ribbon and twine storage. I don't use ribbon and twines very much in my projects. So I just bought these packs of American Crafts twine, and this is all I have, and I found that it's really worked well for me to have less selection. I always reach for these. As I mentioned, I have more inks in these drawers. These are my mini distress inks. Now really you don't need the full ink pads and the minis, but I have these so I can take them when I go crafting at a retreat with friends. And I have additional ink blending tools and extra foam here in case I need them. Here I have some more of my ink cubes. Most of these inks are available in a big ink pad, but a lot of them are unique and only available in the cube size. So I have all of these laid out in the top drawer. This is the Tim Holtz Distress Ink container, and you saw that in my last drawer for my Distress Ink cubes. I actually use the same container for these inks. They fit perfectly, but I break the top off so that I just have the base to keep them all straight and organized. I don't usually take these inks away from this drawer, so that's why I didn't think that the lid was necessary. In the rest of these drawers, I have more inks. In this one, I have all of my pigment inks. One of the things I like about pigment inks is the color of the ink pad is the true color of the ink inside. So there's no need to put a little ink dot on the side showing the color. Now with pigment inks, I like to have re-inkers. They seem to be needed to be re-inked more often. So I have all my re-inkers for my pigment inks here. I do have re-inkers for my distress inks also. I have those stored in a tin. But for most dye inks, I don't buy re-inkers because I find they rarely need re-inking. Now in this drawer right by my door, I have some projects to take on the go. I'm always at kids' practices or heading out the door, so I have some things that I can take with me to get done. For example, this has some finished cards, envelopes, stamps, and return address. I just take that and I can fill out some cards to send to loved ones and then mail them when I get back home. I also have some other projects that maybe have some stamps and papers that I want to use together in a pouch so that I can grab that and work with that. For a long time, I really struggled with how to store my 8.5 by 11 colored cardstock. I wanted to keep the colors separate so that I could tell people what I'm using on projects, and I could order more if I needed more. So what I came up with is these job ticket sleeves I get at an office supply store. They're nice and sturdy, and I can keep lots of 8.5 by 11 cardstock in it. And then if I have a scrap of the piece, I can store that in there also. I do label it so that if I need to know the color or need to order more, I can easily do so. I have these sleeves in some magazine holders, and that helps to keep them nice and organized. Up here I have my neutrals and some specialty cardstocks also. This system has really worked well for me. It keeps me organized and it also keeps everything compact. Sometimes I like to add a little hand touch to my card by using a bit of sewing. So I have a sewing machine, but I didn't want to keep it out on my countertop. So I put it in the cabinet. Whenever I want to sew, I just pull the machine out, bring down the foot pedal and do my sewing, and then I can put it away. So I have plugs in these cabinets also. That's really helpful to keep everything organized to have those plugs in there. If you can't do that, you could always drill a hole in the back of your cabinet and lead that to a plug. Up here I have some more tools that are best stored in sleeves. These are the same sleeves that I use for cardstock. So up here I have things like my double-sided tape, my masking paper. That way I can keep even the smallest scraps and put them to use later. I do have it labeled on the bottom so I can easily flip through them all and find what I need. Over here I have some pads of watercolor paper and some more specialty papers. And on the other side of my desk I have a spot where my kids can craft with me, or I can have friends over. In this cabinet, I have things that aren't so fun but are really useful to have. This is probably the tool that gets the most use of my craft room. This is a hand vac, and I can just unplug it, take it to my work surface, use it to clean up quickly any little scraps of paper. This really helps me to keep my room a little more tidy than it normally used to be. Here I have my organization bin. In here I have stamp pockets with the inserts ready to go, die pockets, all of my organization all in this one spot. So when I get a new product, I can go ahead and put it away, label it, and then we're good to go. Here I have my label machine, some pouches to put projects in, and some dry cloths to clean up with. I do have a shelf on this side also to keep trimmers for whoever's crafting on this side. A big part of our hobby is actually sending the cards that we create. So once I've completed a card, I come over here and I put it in a sleeve with a matching envelope. Sometimes I even stamp on the envelope so it matches perfectly. In this container, which is the same kind of container I store my clear stamps in, I have all the cards that I've created and separated them by themes. So I have sympathy, hello, thank you, and so on. This way, when I need to send a card, I look for a perfect card for the occasion and just grab that. Then I go up to this drawer where I have a pouch that holds a bunch of different postage stamps and my return address labels. I also have different fun decorative washies that I can put on the envelopes and additional envelopes and other mailing needs. This has really helped me to actually send more cards. So the more cards I make, the more cards I can send. On these shelves, I have my 12 by 12 cardstock. I love the look of the rainbow. Now these 12 by 12 cardstocks are actually back from my scrapbooking days, but I kept them on hand and I use them for card making sometimes. I had a laminate put on top of the shelves because I knew I'd be pulling these in and out a lot and I didn't want to destroy the shelves. It allows them to come out smoothly. So lately my hobby has been to do die cutting of felt and then do stitching while I'm on the go. So I was struggling to find a way to store my felt and I found it was best to do it just like I did my paper storage. I have each color stored in a sleeve and I put the name of this color on top and I put a little swatch on the edge so I could see it when I'm looking through. I have the felt inside and I can keep even the tiniest pieces of felt in here. This storage system has worked out really well for me and it actually saves the amount of room because I'm compressing everything down. In the baskets and container above, I have some re-inkers and other supplies that I don't use as often. And below I have in my cabinets some giveaways that I plan to send out to blog readers and some shipping supplies. In this corner I have more shelves with additional supplies. I recommend finding a container that you like and sticking with that and use that throughout your room. I also recommend having some of the containers be empty so that you have some room to grow. I find that's really helpful and I don't waste as much time finding new places for new things. I also recommend to put up some things that you find inspiring. These are 3 of my favorite quotes, so I wanted them nearby so I could see them often. Thank you for joining me on this tour of my craft space. I hope that bits and pieces of it inspire you to get more organized also. But keep in mind, everybody's different. Some people like a creative mess. Some people, like me, like to be organized. Do whatever you need to do to make it your happy space. After all, this is all about creating cards to make others smile and share a little bit of handmade kindness. If you'd like to see more on any specific area in my craft room or bits of organization, be sure to check out the videos below in my description. And also, if you haven't yet, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching and we'll see you soon.